Welcome to the Hard Lessons podcast. I'm your host, Charlie, founder of an Oakville-based construction company. Each week, we dive into the world of business, personal development, and the entrepreneurial journey. We'll be talking with successful business owners who've been in the trenches and learned those hard lessons. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take business to the next level, you're in the right place. Join us as we turn hard lessons into stepping stones for success. Welcome to the Hard Lessons podcast. Today we have Dan here, a $5 million window painting business here in Toronto, and almost 1,000 5-star Google reviews. Super impressive organization you guys are running. It blows my mind, the efficiencies and how in-depth you guys are with all your metrics. I believe you're from Montreal. You came to Toronto, very limited network, and blew up the Toronto market and took over. So I can't wait to hop into things. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
If we can start, correct me, fill me in and paint the people the picture of what I missed, where you came from, and how you got to where you guys are now.
Yeah, sure. So basically, grew up in Montreal, went to business school, realized that business school doesn't teach you how to run a business. Very disappointed. Got involved with a company called Student Painters that taught me how to run a business by painting houses and knocking on doors while I was in university. So I did that for a few years, for about 4 years. I kind of climbed the ranks from running a painting business to teaching other people how to run a painting business to then creating the systems and kind of being their guinea pig for the window cleaning franchise they wanted to start. Saw a lot of things I didn't like in the home service industry, saw a lot of opportunity for kind of disruption and for growth, and recognized that there was this simultaneously really low bar that of standards that companies had. And I was kind of on a mission at that point to A, just to figure out like what I wanted to do, and B, it seemed like a good opportunity to go on a mission of like setting a new standard for how home services are behave and how they are perceived as well. And so I figured if I could at least do really great work, then that could be a good business model. And so what happened was I left the city after I graduated, left the company. Ran a few other businesses in the meantime, worked for another startup, tried a bunch of different things, and then just fell back into home services when I moved here. Moved here 6 years ago to just like get away from all the partying and friends and just kind of put my blinders on. With my best friend, we decided to start a window cleaning company originally that was just maybe going to do some decks as like a side hustle in terms of deck staining and outdoor painting. There was no building involved. And that eventually turned into a business that became 50-50 decks and windows. So we have Shine Windows and the Deck People, which is our staining company. And so we're actually the only company in the city that will guarantee that a deck won't peel and that we can actually maintain it with low maintenance over time. And so what started as just knocking on doors eventually started to scale, and we got received very well. It seemed like there was this problem that people had where they were stuck between this local guy who wasn't reliable for pretty much every service they wanted and these big companies who just didn't care or didn't know how to manage a business. And so we figured if we could just offer this high-end service where the job wasn't just good, but like the experience of working with us was really great, it would give people a reason to keep coming back. And so on the window cleaning side, you got this repeat revenue model where people keep coming back to you. They need that service annually. And so they don't forget about you in 10 years when they need something else on their house. And so you're always top of mind. And it started as just, brick by brick, knocking on doors. I ended up marrying my best friend. And so we run the business together. We convinced our other two best friends in Montreal to move here and kind of run our sales and our production. And so now the four of us run it together. And we've since scaled that to about 40 people on the team. And now we've got a remote worker in Alberta who runs our scheduling. We've got a bunch of people here. My in-laws work with us. So it's definitely become a little bit of a family operation.
Awesome. So moving into the city, like what was, I guess, the first step of yours to making a name and getting things off the ground as a new business?
Yeah, we didn't really overthink it. We were actually on a trip in Colombia, and we sat in like a broken down internet cafe and just like wrote out a somewhat of a business plan. And like most business plans, nothing ended up happening the way we thought it would, but we were originally going to franchise. And then we decided not to because we realized that franchising, the money's not really that great unless you hit like absolute maximum scale. B, your business becomes, I want to convince people to buy my idea and not, I want to do really great work. And so I saw that as a distraction from my ultimate goal, which was really just to run the best home service company possible. And C, I just think that franchising in our industry has a lot of reasons why it's not very fulfilling. It's not a great business model. In restaurants, more so, but in what we do, it's not super attractive. And so I wanted to have full control over what I was doing, and I didn't want someone else to tell me that they had other ideas that maybe weren't as good and that I couldn't tell them what to do. The only thing that stayed consistent was the name Shine. And you can see I'm wearing, my deck shirt now. But we moved here and we just started knocking on doors, and we never thought it was going to grow like this fast. It was really just, like an idea of, hey, maybe we can go make some money and we don't have to work for or start a tech company where we have to rely on other people's money. And then we're never actually profitable because we borrow $10 million and then we make $1 million, but it's not really ours and you only own 3% of the company. And so it was just this notion of like, provide a service, create value, get paid immediately, make profit day one. And it was always just driven by like, how happy is the homeowner at the end of the experience? And then, when they're not, or when there's a problem, looking back saying, okay, how could we have done better? And any part of this experience, iterate, do it again. And doing that over the course of 6 years on thousands of houses has, ultimately built a model that I'm proud to say, is ours.
I love it. And it's definitely not on accident. I wouldn't say it just happened. There was a hell of a lot, I'm sure, that was put in place intentionally. And like, how much of it would you say, sure, the product is great. It's, and that's how you guys are known and are standing out. But also like on the marketing side, if you're going back to that first year, how much of it was just like a kick-ass service, but how much of it also was the strategic marketing?
There was not really much strategy behind the marketing. It's something that I think most trade businesses overthink now, where the first thing they want to do is go figure out Facebook ads. And, not everyone wants to do this, but at the end of the day, really all I did was knock on doors and smile. Like, did that for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And then on Saturday and Sunday, I'd go and, revisit all those houses that I met Monday to Friday, and I would do the estimates for them. Or I would go, 7 days a week knocking on doors. And then in the nights when I was done, that was when I would talk to people when they got home from work, and I would do the appointments. And so we didn't have really a Google presence. There was no SEO. There was no advertising. It was literally that. And like, halfway into the first year, I made flyers that had a photo of my face and said kind of my story. And so the service was definitely not kick-ass in the beginning. At the time, I thought it was, but relative now to what I know we're doing versus how we were performing then, it was, I would say, just good enough to beat a lot of the competition, but we certainly weren't getting as many reviews as we have now. We certainly weren't getting as many repeat customers. There was a lot more headache going into it. And so now, we still make mistakes, but I think we're way quicker at fixing them. We're way more in tune with anticipating the needs of the client and needs of our staff. And, I like to say now, like our worst worker today is infinitely better than our best worker was when we started. And so just the bar of how we view everything has gone up and up and up. And I think that, the biggest advice that I have for anyone who's starting a trade business is really like, stop trying to rush to get there. Stop trying to avoid the hard work. Literally, if you can, if it's legal in your country or your area, like, just go knock on doors, because it's the fastest feedback loop for seeing why a customer won't hire you. Why will they hire you? What do they like about you? And you take all that data over the course of thousands of homes, and you can translate it later into when you do make advertisements and when you do expand your brand, you now have a really deep understanding of the person, instead of just like hoping that people pick up the phone and call and you don't actually understand your customer.
Interesting. And so door knocking really is like, how long did that keep out, or did you even like scale the door knocking team and hold off on the Facebook and Google stuff till way later on?
Yeah. So Google, we kind of started from day one, but it takes a while to build up Google. And door knocking it still is a huge part of our business. In the beginning, it was 100% of our sales. Now it's probably maybe 20 to 30% of our annual sales, but it's still huge because most companies will shut down in the winter, and they go up to Mexico, and they show up in May, and they're like, all right, it's summer. Like, let me go and work with my clients and try to grow my business. And, here we are from January till May. getting such a massive head start on the season, but when every company is shut down, when everybody's looking for jobs, when all the customers aren't getting bombarded with calls and we're calling them and we're getting ahead of it. And so what happens there is we just have this massive head start where 40% of our whole year is booked by May 1st. Like the season is already halfway done for us. We know what numbers we're going to hit. We know how many people we need to hire. And so what happened with door knocking was eventually you kind of saturate the market. And, a lot of people think they've saturated the market, but until you knock on every door 6 times in the span of 3 months, like you're not, because you knock on someone's door, they're not home. Maybe they are home. A month later, they've forgotten who you are. So going back isn't this like incessant thing. And the key that a lot of people miss is they don't want to be bothersome. And, we're very pragmatic about it. Like the way I see it is I try to knock on doors and train my staff to knock on doors as if, we live down the street from the homeowner. We're not trying to force anything on them. We're literally just going and asking them, hey, these are the services we're offering. Do you need anything? And if the client says no, then you just move on to the next house. And the key is just the people who do say, yes, I do need something, or, I might, is having a real conversation with them and showing them that, we're normal people. We want to do good work. We're excited for the opportunity. And that's half the battle, right? Because a lot of companies are hard to even get on the phone. So the fact that we can show you that we're willing to knock on your door in the middle of a snowstorm and we're so eager for the work, you can kind of assume that we want to do a good job from there. And so another issue with home services is that everyone has to lay off all their staff in the winter. But 90% of running a business is retaining good staff and training them. And so in order to combat that, rather than hiring a bunch of door-to-door sales guys for 3 months, what we've done is we've told any of our staff who can speak like decent English and who want to go and speak to other customers and keep working, is we just retain them for the whole winter. We keep paying them their normal salary and we have them knock on doors. And so they get to build relationships with the homeowners that they're going to end up working with later on. And a lot of the time, they knock on that door in February and in July they're at the house and they're, oh, I remember you, Susan. Yeah, I was the one who knocked on your door. And so they get to feel a lot more installed in the business. They get a lot more ownership in it. The clients love it because they actually meet the people who are doing the work, and the staff love it because they have job security and they don't have to go and, find another job, and we don't have to worry about letting them go and finding someone else. And so it's not the optimal sales fit. You're not getting guys who are like hardcore closers that are crushing sales at the door. But at the end of the day, it's just fantastic for morale and for team building and retention. And it makes our summers go way better.
Awesome. And I'm sure like a huge part of it's also, you mentioned, sure, not the salesy side, but the service side of all the technical questions that pop up from the client, and just building trust of like, yeah, we do this part of the window, or we're able to use oil as opposed to a paint for staining the deck, or whatever it is. Now you're going back to just doing the hard work, and you mentioned just like, don't be scared of the hard work, and just, work hard. There's a lot of hard lessons and you're going to eat shit like those first few years. I'm curious, like if you can give us a split or how you manage your time, because you can be pulled in so many different directions, and you're starting this business, you're an optimist, you're saying yes to all these things. I guess how did you say no, and where did you put your time with, you're in a new city, networking is important, but if you're spending all your time at all these events, it's probably going to bite you in the ass. And then the other side of that, just knocking doors, doing the hard work, leads, sales, go. Where did you stand?
Yeah, it's a great point. I would say like, networking is good, but like a lot of people network to say that they know a lot of cool people. And if you meet the right person, you just need that one person, and you don't need to go to any networking throughout the year. Like this year, I tried to network more because I didn't do a lot of it in the past. And it got to a point where I had to start like turning down events because I was like, I met this guy in March who gave me advice, and I still, it's October, and I still haven't finished implementing everything that I learned from him. And I think a lot of guys are, they go to a new event every month and they keep trying to learn. And it's like the people who read 12 business books a year, and they're on Instagram following Alex Formosi, and all they do is they consume the content, but they don't implement. I will say that like I'm notoriously bad at time management and staying focused. And so I'm very fortunate that, my wife, Kendra, who runs the business with me, is, she's very quick to tell me when I'm being an idiot or when I'm losing focus and I'm thinking about the wrong things. But how do you balance your time? I mean, I think it depends on what season of life you're in and what you want to be doing. I think that now I work a lot fewer hours than I used to. When I started the business, I don't know many people that actually put in that much work. I probably have like 2 or 3 friends that I think could actually match that work ethic. And that was just because, I didn't care about anything else. We were working 7 days a week. We were up at 6 a.m. We were starting work at 7. We'd go until 9, 10 o'clock at night. We'd go to bed. We'd do it again the next day. There was no lunches and breaks and hanging out with friends. Like, we just didn't do that because we moved here and we knew almost no one. And we did that on purpose because we just didn't want to be distracted. And so, for the first 2 years, I think we didn't really take a vacation. I think we went to Florida for like 5 days at one point, but that was just how it was. And now I have a much more balanced life because I don't wear every hat in the business. I have an amazing team of people that I can rely on to go and do things when I can't or don't want to. And, I try to, at this point, like, stop working at like 6 or 7 o'clock, but there's still all kinds of, like, last night we had a team meeting that dragged on until 10 o'clock at night. Things were blowing up and we had to figure it out. And so, yeah, I think it's just about, like, I think a lot of people are looking, including myself often, we look for the shortcuts and we want the answers to, how do I make millions of dollars in the next 10 days? And usually that's the answer to that question is how to not get there and how to not build a great business. And the real answer is spend, 3 years not looking up, not looking at anyone else, not trying to make all this money, and just focusing on the things that matter, making sure your team is happy, making sure your clients are happy, making sure your business is not losing money and making a decent profit. And then just trying to do that day and day and day. And then maybe after 3 years of doing that, look up, look around, see what other people are doing, have a few conversations, and then go back to work. Right. Now it's the end of the year and this is when I have the most free time, which is why I'm able to do this. And I even catch myself. I have 10 conversations like this in the span of a week, where normally I would not do it at all. I'd have one of them in the whole year and my head starts getting in the clouds and I start thinking about all this other stuff and losing sight about the fact that, how are our ads doing? Like, what are the KPIs on that? Are we doing the right things every day? What are the goals that we have next year? How are we compensating people next year? And so when that happens, I generally decline and I have to kind of come back down to earth and go, okay, like we gotta work in the mud for a little bit.
So just that balance, right? Because you don't know what you don't know at the same time of like what it takes to get to 1 million versus 3 million versus 30 million. You're a completely different person. And there's only so sure, the hard lessons will get you there, but also the lessons you learn without the scar from the conversations and talking to people. So yeah, I think a transparent line. Yeah. And with how you're splitting things up, I'm curious, how you prioritize, when you're sitting down, it's so easy to just get buried in the work and the to-do list is endless. I saw a video of yours, important to be in the field with the guys and see the actual operations, because a lot of guys can be so blind to that of fully off the tools. I'm up here, I'm making all these decisions and reviewing these KPIs. How do you split that up within your schedule of monitoring crews? How are their efficiencies? Where are deficiencies? And making your rounds within the business and then also running your CEO, if that makes sense.
I would say I'm probably less of CEO than Kendra. I don't know what to call my role, if it was COO or
the pretty
I'm
face.
kind of, she's more, because she's more on the strategic kind of all seeing eye end. I get very hyper focused when I'm in something, and sometimes that's not good. I get myopic. I lose the ability to kind of look around to what's happening around me, which is great because I can get really deep on what I'm doing, but then I miss things. And so she's good at kind of having a bird's eye view of everything. And then I would say, how do I know when? Often it's when something blows up. I'd love to say that I'm the most proactive person in the world and I get things before they happen, but usually it's a result of, me focusing on one thing and then finding out that there's a cascade of issues happening somewhere else. And then the team is like, Dan, this is all falling apart. And then I have to kind of take a step back and go, shit, okay, how do I stop what I'm doing now? Or at least get it done quickly so that I can go and be out in the field for 2 weeks and help the team with that. How can I And usually there's other problems. There's third and second order consequences from that, because it's not just that Dan needs to be out in the field. It's why does Dan need to be out in the field? Well, the teams aren't getting trained fast enough. And why is that? Okay, because the managers aren't understanding how to train the teams fast enough. And that's hurting quality. So now we have to fix quality. We have to retrain the managers. We have to get these teams off the ground. And so it's a lot of just like juggling parts. And so I'll kind of say, is what I'm doing now a higher priority, or is that a higher priority? Usually that's like urgent and immediate. So I'll kind of pause on what I'm doing there, or I'll decide to, block 2 or 3 hours in a week to just focus on that. And then I jump in the field, and then I might have to spend 2-3 weeks at a time training teams, looking at them, seeing what they're missing, what they're not missing, asking the managers like what kind of systems they're using or not knowing to use. And then, and yeah, so in terms of time management and like knowing that, it's still something I struggle with tremendously. I'm very fortunate that now the managers we have gotten a lot better than in the past. So it went from, me just being responsible for everything to then me still being responsible for everything, but having some help that I thought I could count on, and then, over trusting them and realizing that I should have I should have been less trusting and monitored more. Something I heard Layla Hormozi say that really resonated with me is that, as owners, 99% of us are like ADHD, like we just kind of run towards the shiny object that looks like it'll give us the biggest reward. And so we're looking for the silver bullet, right? Like we want to hire that person or promote that guy who we think is just going to solve all our problems and take all that work off our plate. And that's just a mistake, right? So there's a difference between delegating and abdicating. So abdicating is what most of us do, which is, you give someone a responsibility, say, this is your job. And then we go and we work on other shit that we want to work on. And we just leave that person to go and like figure it out. And 99% of the time, they aren't just going to figure it out, because if they could, then they would just run their own business. And so what delegating is it's instead of just handing something off and being lazy about it, it's saying, here's what I want you to do. And now instead of just running away from it, I'm going to sit down with you and I'm going to like tell you what to do. And then we're going to go through that system together. And we're going to build a system. And then I'm going to watch you do it. And then I'm going to judge you based on the system that we just made. And there's probably going to be some discrepancies. We're going to adjust that system accordingly until we get to a point where you're just able to do this job like 100% or 80% with me monitoring you. And then I'm going to let you go. And then 2 weeks from now, I'm going to check back in, see how you're doing. And we're going to slowly step away from that person in that role up to the point where we go, okay, now we only have to talk like once a month or once every couple of weeks. And I'll be able to just monitor how you're doing. And so I think that was a big lesson that I'm still learning, but that I really got this year, which was that I'm way too quick to hand things off. And I just think like, I'll figure it out later. And, when everything burns, then I'll hear about it. But that doesn't work for customers. That doesn't work for your staff. Like that stresses people out. And so I'm trying to be a lot more patient and thoughtful about, the early stage process so that later we can execute and just move forward.
So just slowing things down when bringing people on. Like I'm curious where you're at in terms of the trust part. Because bringing people on, I feel I've like just from experience in the past, I don't trust them enough, so they aren't able to fully do their job and see them make the decisions and learn the hard lessons. At the same time, I've done completely the other side of the spectrum of just fully threw it all on them, threw them in the deep end, and they sunk. And is that kind of what you're alluding to, is just slowing that down, sitting down, having it on paper, and then easing into it?
I don't think it's about trust. I think most of it is laziness and wishful thinking. I think that when we bring people on, usually if it's a role that you know really well, then you have trouble trusting and you're overbearing because you're like, I know this. But then there's the other 50%, which is a role that you don't want to do. So this is something like admin, scheduling. It depends on what you like to do as an owner, but usually we like to do the sales. We like to be out there on the front lines. And so the roles that, I found that the roles that we love to do, we usually are overbearing on, and the roles that we don't love to do, we just hand off immediately and we walk away. And I think that, trust is an objective thing. It's not something that you either just have or don't have. Like it happens because you watch someone do something well, and then you can confidently predict that they're going to repeatedly do it well in the future. And so when people do, or when they have blind trust, it's just unfounded and they're being lazy. And when they don't have blind trust and they're overbearing, or they're, watching over someone's shoulder and trying to micromanage, it's usually because they haven't given that person the tools to, to prove to them whether or not they can or can't do it. And so the way that you do that isn't just by like figuring it out, so to speak. Like, there is a proven process and a formula to that. Like, you have to write down on a document like what you want from this person, and then you have to give them that document, and then you have to tell it to them 72 times, and you need to watch them do it, and then you're going to watch them do it on their own. And it's going to be like, a parent watching their kid swim for the first time. You don't just throw a 1-year-old in a pool. You're going to stand there and kind of hold them, and then in 6 months you're going to let them swim on their own, but you're still going to be in the pool. And then by the time they're 7 or 8, you're just lying on a lounge chair, and maybe the older brother is sitting there watching them, and someone's home, but the kid is swimming on their own. So it's this gradual like pullback of oversight, but you still always have to know what the flaws are. So it's not just about letting people like fail and figure it out. It's about being there to say, hey, like, you made this mistake, and like, here's why, and giving them that like safe space to do it where everything's not going to fall apart.
I love the analogy, the swimming.
Yeah.
Right on. Now, like, on the leadership side of things, and to recap that more so, like, documenting, watch them do it with them, hold their hand, and just slow things down and be slightly more patient when bringing in new people. In terms of culture, and honestly, like, this is just coming from me this season, we've struggled with of being way too lenient and things get way too loose.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's for fun. No one gives a shit. And then tightening things right up. And then, you just end up being pissed off at everyone, and everyone's just kind of aggravated. And it's the other side of the spectrum of everyone hates their life, but we're trying to tighten things. Profit margins aren't bad. It's, you know what I mean? It's just, I don't know. Where's your head at on that topic?
On how to build great culture.
Yeah, and where to draw the line on how hard to be on your teams, and how, where to draw the line of being on them, lay the hammer, but at the same time, a good place to work. And,
Yeah, I think usually that falls back on me, and the team. Like, most of the time, if we bring someone into the business, the better we get, the better we're getting at identifying whether or not this person is a culture fit from day one. So, I get someone I know loosely, who I would say has been very good to me. His name is Brian Gottlieb. He wrote a book called Beyond the Hammer this year, and he sold his home service business for about a $250 million, I think, last year. A super smart guy, and in the book he talks a lot about how to build team culture. And so I called him after I read the book, and I asked him about it, and he said, your culture is essentially the lowest form of behavior that you tolerate on your team. Because when everybody sees that person behaving, then that, like, he can get away with it. So, I can too. And people will usually default to whatever is, their self-interest, like what's in their own best interest. And so something that we've always paid lip service to and not actually done up until this year was have a set of values. Like, what are our core values? And so, we had all these nice to hear things, but no one ever remembered them. They were just in a document somewhere. And so what we did after reading this book was I called my head of production, and I said, the values need to be created in a way where they can allow us to make decisions quicker. There's too many gray area questions that come up, which is why people aren't taking control of the culture. So, for example, if someone shows up kind of late one day, it's like, how do you behave? If someone's usually doing good work, but 20% of the time doesn't do good work, like, how do you reprimand this? He's not bad enough to fire him, but he's not good enough that you want him to stay here forever and set an example for the team. What I found was that, I created a strike system. I said, managers, like, give these guys 3 strikes, and after 3 strikes, they're out. But they wouldn't always give out the strike. And so I said, how can we give them like a very concrete way of giving out this strike? And so we created these 3 values. And the first one is face it, fix it. So we want to make sure that, when someone has a problem, that we can go to them and we can tell them there's a problem, and they will take ownership of it, and we can figure out what they can do better moving forward. If they don't want to take responsibility and they don't want to fix the problem, then they are not a culture fit. The second one is leave it better than you found it, which is that, you can go to a house and you can do a beautiful job cleaning their gutters, But if you leave some leaves on their front porch, you didn't leave this house better than you found it. If you knock something over, you got to put it back up. And so that's the second one. And the third one was gratitude. We there's a lot of companies, I think this is a very common thing, where you have these high performers that come in, but they have a big ego and they're not grateful to be there, and they're only going to get as good as they are because they don't feel like they have anything else to learn. And if they're not grateful to be here, then they can't grow with the company. They might be good now, but eventually the company will outgrow them and they won't be able to come with us. And so now, and the way we came up with those is we asked ourselves, what are the 20 workers over the last 5 years that we had that should have been let go 6 months before we let them go, and we waited too long. We said, well, this guy, this is why he slipped through the cracks, but the biggest problem was that he was just never grateful. That was the problem. So that's how gratitude came up. And then another one was, he was great, but he didn't really want to deal with the problems. Like every time we had feedback, he didn't take the feedback, and then he went from being a great worker to a not so great worker. And so we've created those values to kind of empower the staff to make those decisions. And then you just have to have like a very, very low tolerance for BS. And there's things that are, black and white that you can hold people accountable to. And then there are things that are gray areas, which are harder. So when you have something like someone showing up late to work, that's black and white. Like if we start at 7:30 and you show up at 7:31, then you're late. It doesn't matter that you're 1 minute late. You're still late. And if you do that 3 times, then, what else are you not respecting in terms of the company and your team waiting for you? And so when people see how hard and how strictly you uphold those parts of the culture, then they take everything else a lot more seriously. And so at that point, it's just about, you constantly having conversations. When people's culture gets out of hand, it's usually because they don't deal with the small stuff when it happens. You go, Jim was late, but Jim is usually good. And Jim doesn't usually like when I tell him he's late. He kind of fights me on it. So I think I'm just going to let this one go because he was only 5 minutes late today. And hopefully we can, just move forward. Jim is not moving forward from that. Like Jim saw that, Charlie knows that he was late and he got away with it. So he's going to see what else can I get away with.
So it's not always malicious. Thing. It's not only the thing, but it's that thing, but also everything else that they're doing throughout the day, them and their team, right?
What you've done is you've trained them to believe that they don't have to follow the rules and they don't have to behave appropriately 100% of the time, because when their manager's not watching, or when their manager is watching but doesn't want to deal with something, then they can get away with it. And they're just going to keep pushing and pushing because, that's what humans do. That's what children do. People want structure. They want to know what they can do and what they can't do. And usually the hardest conversations to have are the ones where you haven't been keeping it 100% real with your staff throughout the year. And then you've decided, okay, I can't do this anymore. And you say, all right, Mike, we can't do this anymore. You're fired. And Mike is blindsided. Mike's going, oh my God, like, I can't believe you're letting me go now. Like, I tell my team all the time, like you should fire people left and right. Like, I want you to let people go whenever you feel you need to. But if someone is ever surprised that they're being let go, you didn't do your job. That means that it could be your fault that it didn't work out. So in our minds, it's like the firing conversation should never be a hard one because you should have already had 37 conversations with that person prior to firing them, letting them know, hey, you were late. Hey, you've been late 3 times. Hey, I didn't like the way you slept. Like, you got to be all over them. And so by the time you have to have that hard conversation, they're like, don't even say it. I know.
They already know.
Doing what I need to do. Yeah, they're like, I get it. And they're usually relieved. They're like, oh, this has been a hard time. Like, I don't want to keep fighting you every day. Like, I do think that I should leave. And you're like, hey, I want the best for you. Like, I want you to win, but it's not going to work here. So best of luck. And so, yeah, I think it's just about being like really, really like not letting any small things go. And the same in relationships, right? Like when you're with like a girlfriend or a wife or husband or whatever, it's like when people let shit go, they don't actually let it go. They hold on to it for 6 months and then it comes up in some argument later. Yeah. And it's not an easy way to live because to constantly every day tell someone that they're doing something wrong, have to balance it out with telling them all the things they do right. You have to balance out with positive in the relationship. And ultimately, I think that's what, makes a really good manager is how well they're able to balance that, emotional capital that they have with someone and show them that they care. And they're coming to them out of, love and wanting more for them, as opposed to being this like hard ass,
like
who's
just nagging them
and making them feel bad. Exactly. It's always got to be tied to like, what is the incentive for them? I'm not like, Jeff, this is your third day late. Like, stop being a dick. It's usually the way I would go about it. I'd be like, Jeff, like, this is the third day you're late. Like, I really want you to work here. And it seems like when you're here, you're happy and you're doing good work and we get along. But like, this is something I just like, it's a non-negotiable for me. Like, your team is waiting for you. They can't start the job without the equipment and carry all the equipment. Like, how can we get you? What's happening that you can't get here on time? And either Jeff's going to be like, I'm an idiot and I slept through my alarm. Or he's going to say, I stay up really late. And then you get to the root of the problem. You go, okay, you stay up late every night. What time do you go to bed? I go to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay, well, can we agree that if you have to be up at 4:30, then going to bed at 1 o'clock is probably not conducive to you getting to work? Okay, can you change that behavior? Okay, good. And then we see and we track, did he do it or not?